Well, during that visit, David Cameron vowed that the world would come together to keep Iran from shutting down the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic State was just one of the issues raised in Riyadh. Let's now discuss the visit with Mehdi Hasan. He's senior editor of politics at the New Statesman. Now, the British Prime Minister has arrived in the country that we're now seeing is using lethal force to disperse protesters there, talking about many issues, including about removing the Syrian president, who's also accused, of course, of using lethal force to disperse protesters. Now, many would say that Britain is in danger of losing any moral authority it might have over visits like this. Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm one of these people who've said that Britain lost its moral authority in the Middle East when we invaded Iraq illegally in 2003. But over the last 12 months, some would say that Britain helped restore its own authority by giving backing to the Arab Spring belatedly. David Cameron said last year that we had an opportunity, a responsibility to back those people in the Middle East who were calling for freedom and democracy. And yet now we have a Prime Minister who, as your reporter mentioned, arrives in Riyadh the morning after a protester is shot dead in the Shia province. In the Eastern province, and Saudi Arabia is the single biggest barrier to freedom and democracy in the Middle East. It's a bit rich for the Prime Minister, our British Prime Minister, to stand in Saudi Arabia and condemn the dictator in Syria without looking around him at all the dictators who are surrounding him in Riyadh.
Well, Saudi Arabia invests hugely in British-made arms. This is very vital, though, is it not, for the British economy and for the British people, that David Cameron should keep relations with the likes of Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think most experts who have looked at our arms industry would have argued that actually it's the economic arguments in favour of the arms industry are spurious and have long been held to be spurious. I also think there's a moral issue here. Not only are we not backing people in Saudi Arabia who are calling for greater civil liberties, greater democratic reforms, but we're actually arming the tyrants. That's the kind of the double whammy of Britain's relationship right now with some of those dictators in the Middle East. And I've written in print that if you want to deal with a British minister who goes on and on about backing freedom in the Middle East, you only need to say two words, and that is Saudi and Arabia. And it's not just arms, by the way. Let's not forget the politics of this. The enemy number one in the Middle East right now is Iran, and Saudi Arabia is a very useful strategic ally in the alliance against Iran, and that's why you saw the Prime Minister talking about Iran today in Saudi Arabia as well. Again, deeply hypocritical to talk about Iran's violations of laws and human rights and protesters' rights in the most tyrannical country in the Middle East, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Just how nervous should the Saudi Arabian government be over the current tensions we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment and its own domestic situation?
I think the Saudis are very, very nervous. They're nervous about, as I said, their own minority Shia population, which is one of the reasons they sent troops into next-door Bahrain to help suppress the protests there, because they were worried about the protests coming home to Saudi Arabia. They're worried about the role that Turkey is playing in the region, which has become very assertive, is becoming a regional power, which is backing the new Islamic governments in Egypt and in Tunisia. And, of course, they're worried about Shia Iran, which they believe is doing very well out of the Arab Spring. As Sunni dictators fall, Iran does very well, and Iran's been doing well since the fall of Saddam. So I think Saudi Arabia is worried externally, its role in the region as a leader of the Sunni majority, and it's worried about its own internal critics. The king tried buying off his critics, giving out money, giving out grants to try and buy people off. That hasn't worked, and so instead we see this cracking down on dissent, like last night's use of live ammunition against peaceful protesters.
Saudi Arabia, of course, very important to the West very important for Saudi Arabia. If there is any sense of political change there, just what could the impact be in the whole of the region, bearing in mind all the rest of the area being unsettled?
Well, we always talk about, instability. The traditional Western strategic view was we have to back the King of Saudi Arabia and other such despots because without them there'll be chaos and instability. Well, what we saw over the last 12 months is sometimes chaos and instability can be a good thing. It can involve people taking their God-given rights and forming democracies. Look, Saudi Arabia is not going to turn into a democracy overnight, but let's not pretend that we don't have to push for greater reform in Saudi Arabia. We think Saudi Arabia is an ally, but actually, over the last 30 years, by allying ourselves with Saudi Arabia, we've actually created generations of extremists, of anti-Western terrorists who will resent the fact that we back the despots in Saudi Arabia. Bin Laden famously started Al-Qaeda because he was so upset about Western bases in Saudi Arabia.
Really interesting to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much, Mehdi, for your perspective on this. Mehdi Hasan, senior editor of politics at the New Statesman. Thanks for joining us live on RT.